Cole Beasley is back, and it's also time to break down the Buffalo Bills' Week 15 opponent, the challenges they present, and what the Bills need to do to deal with them today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Wednesday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Well, folks, we got some stuff to get into here today. Obviously, the Bills have welcomed back Cole Beasley to the practice squad. And then we got to get ready for the Bills matchup against the Miami Dolphins. So we'll do our comprehensive primer today on the Dolphins in a similar way that we did it with the Jets, and that this is the Bills' second matchup against Miami. And so we're going to focus a lot on what's happened recently with those teams and talk about how the Bills need to play against those challenges that exist now and not so much what was going on in week 3. Let's talk about Cole Beasley real quick first, and I'll have probably more to say about this on Friday. And what's going to be interesting about that is we'll have a chance to hear from probably Cole himself and some players and Coach McDermott about Beasley. That'll give us some more insight into their mindset with bringing him back in. But I think we understand what's going on here. The Bills need a little bit of a boost here on offense. They miss Cole Beasley's skill set in a big way, right? That security blanket that has been really important for Josh Allen in the slot being Cole Beasley. If you guys remember the last couple of years, me talking on this podcast about the offense, a lot of times I said, look, when Josh is in a bit of a rut or he's in a lull, he just kind of goes to Cole Beasley and he can get back on schedule. Well, they've missed that guy in this lineup. They've missed that number 2 receiver opposite of Stefon Diggs. And I'm not certain that it's going to be Cole Beasley, right? If he's going to come in and do all the stuff we enjoyed him doing in previous years, I think we have to ask ourselves some good questions about what is reality. You know, what can Cole Beasley do for this football team right now under these circumstances? And I think there's some unknowns there, but the impact could be significant. This could be a very significant move for the Bills offense. I'm not predicting that it will be, but it could be. You have a situation now where guys go back down the pecking order for targets like they were in the past. Gabriel Davis is no longer your number 2. Isaiah McKenzie is no longer your primary slot. And that's more appropriate for the skill sets that they offer. That's something we've talked about a lot on this podcast. So the impact could be significant, which leads me to ask the question, what is the downside? I don't see any. I know that he didn't leave under good terms. He requested a trade, had some things to say about the organization on the way out the door. But I don't believe this was a hasty decision made by the Buffalo Bills to bring him back. I'm sure Josh Allen wanted him back. And I'll be honest, that's good enough for me. It feeds more into stuff I've talked about lately about just trusting what's going on around him. Who did Josh Allen trust over the last several years more than Cole Beasley? Stefon Diggs, end of list. So I don't think it was a hasty decision. I'm sure the Bills are very aware of the way he left and the disruption that he caused and his anti-vax comments that he made and all that crap we had to talk about last year. They're aware of that, and they welcomed him back in. It was a calculated choice that could have a big impact. And so, what's the downside? He can't help your team? Well, okay, that's fine. Nothing's different. You don't lose anything. There's no opportunity cost worth getting into. He's a practice squad player that could have a significant impact on this offense the rest of the way. I think it's a great move for the team. All right, let's talk about the Bills matchup against the Miami Dolphins. Let's get into the nuts and bolts. The Bills are back at home in Week 15 against the Miami Dolphins. The game will be played on Saturday, December 17th at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time at Highmark Stadium in Orchard Park, New York. The game will be broadcasted on NFL Network. Kevin Kugler is on play-by-play. Mark Sanchez is your game analyst. And then you've got two sideline reporters for this one, Laura Oakman and Peter Schrager. Both of them will be patrolling the sidelines, including the postseason. This will be the 118th all-time meeting between the Dolphins and Bills. Miami leads the series with a 62-54-1 all-time record against Buffalo. Obviously, the last time they met was this year in Week 3. The Dolphins won that game 21-19. You remember it. Bills are shorthanded, playing in South Florida. Had some missed opportunities on offense. Josh Allen one-hopped the game-winning touchdown pass to a wide-open Isaiah McKenzie. A lot of attrition there. Tommy Doyle's finishing the game at guard with a torn ACL. I mean, just some really tough circumstances for the Bills. They lost the football game, and it had like double the yards that Miami had. A game that they dominated in every imaginable way except for what matters most, right? Scoring, points for and points against. So the Bills will be looking to not get swept by the Dolphins this year after really having their way with Miami for a number of seasons leading into this. I think going into the year, Sean McDermott was like 9-1 as a head coach against the Dolphins. And so let's see if they can get back on track this week. The Bills enter the game number 1 in the AFC, number 1 in the AFC East with a 10-3 record. The Dolphins are 8-5. Their 8 wins have come against the Patriots, Ravens, Bills, Steelers, Lions, Bears, Browns, and Texans. Their 5 losses came to the Bengals, Jets, Vikings, and then the last 2 weeks, the 49ers and Chargers. They dropped their last 2 games. This is their 3rd game in a row on the road. And so they went to the 49ers, San Francisco, played them 2 weeks ago. They stayed out west and played the Chargers on Sunday Night Football. And now they're back in Miami and play on the road again Saturday night in Buffalo, which is obviously a tough stretch there for the Miami Dolphins, who need this one, right? They're entering this game 8-5. It's really tight there when you look at the teams in contention for the wild card. Obviously, I'm sure they still look at them as having a chance to win the division, and if that's going to happen, they got to have this one on Saturday against Buffalo. And they've really been challenged in some new ways here recently, and we're going to find out some things here. They've got some challenging games. They got the Packers after the Bills. They got the Packers, Jets, and Patriots to go with the Bills as their final 4 games. And so they're going to do it or they won't, right? That's a place we've felt oftentimes for the Bills, who are in a good position, but obviously you don't want to get rid of your wiggle room by dropping this one against Miami, who is the biggest threat to you in winning the division. Let's talk about their quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, 24 years old, 6'1", 217 pounds, the number 5 overall pick in 2020 out of Alabama by the Miami Dolphins. He has now 32 starts under his belt. So he's kind of reached that point where he started for basically 2 seasons worth of games. And the Dolphins have a 21-11 record with him as their starting quarterback. So they've had a lot of success with him. They've won a lot of games. You can debate a lot about the quality of the wins or how they won the games. They won a lot of football games with Tua as their starting quarterback. He's got a good win-loss record for whatever you think that means. So far this year, he's been statistically very good. He's completing 65.5% of his passes, 273 yards per game, 22 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and a passer rating of 108.2. Now let's look deeper into his metrics, and I want to do this like we did for Mike White last week, where we really focus on what's happened recently. And I want to focus on the last 3 games for the Dolphins. There are 3 games coming out of the bye week. I don't know how much his metrics in weeks 1 through 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever those were, I don't know how much they matter right now. And so I want to look at him through the lens of the last 3 weeks coming out of the bye for the Miami Dolphins. And a lot of the numbers are very, very similar. So I don't know that by breaking this down to a 3-week sample size changes a whole lot from what the overall picture has looked like this year. And if that is the case, I will point it out here in our discussion. So let's talk about time to throw. Tua's average time to throw this year is 2.53 seconds. That's 4th fastest in the NFL. He likes to get the ball out very quickly, and Mike McDaniel, their head coach, has done a very good job of putting him in positions to get the ball out quick, whether it's been just taking advantage of free access, timing, using that speed that they have at wide receiver. The offense is designed to get the ball out of Tua's hands quickly, and for the most part, he does that. 56% of the time, Tua gets the ball out in under 2.5 seconds, meaning that 44% of the time he gets that out in over 2.5 seconds. Now, the splits here are drastic. They're drastic when Tua holds onto the ball versus when he gets it out quickly. When he gets it out quickly in under 2.5 seconds, he's completing 61% of his passes, 8.7 yards per attempt, and a passer rating of 101.4. That's over the last 3 games. For the moments where he holds onto the ball for more than 2.5 seconds, the numbers are crazy different. He only completes 39% of his passes. His yards per attempt comes down to 6.2, and his passer rating goes down to 55.6. 55.6 when he holds onto the ball for more than 2.5 seconds. So let's just go through that again, because this is a very stark difference here in the splits. Under 2.5 seconds, he completes 61%. Over 2.5 seconds, 39%. Big difference. Yards per attempt, 8.7 under 2.5, 6.2 over 2.5, and the passer rating 101.4 under 2.5, 55.6 over 2.5. Tua relies on free access, spacing, and pre-snap reads. His processing ability diminishes post-snap and deeper into the snap. So you want to force him to exhaust his progressions. A lot of the stuff we talked about last week with Mike White in that Jets offense applies this week. You want to take the air out of routes. You want to force him to make throws. And we'll get into that a little bit more here in just a moment with schematically what I think the Bills can do to accomplish that. But in general, forcing him to hold on to the football and exhaust progressions and not go with initially where he wants to go with the football is going to be huge. And Mike McDaniel, to his credit, does a very good job of scheming that for Tua. But when Tua has to think deeper into the snap, the results are very, very poor. His average depth of target is 11.8 yards from the line of scrimmage. That's number 2 in the NFL. So the deep ball has been a big thing for Miami this year, which you would expect it to be with Jaylen Waddle and Tyreek Hill as your wide receivers. So the deep vertical passing game is an important part of what they've done this year offensively. That's why they've been successful offensively in a lot of ways. So play action. Play action is 40.4% of his dropbacks. That's number 5 in the NFL. So play action is a huge, huge part of this offense. And it plays into Tua's strengths. He's a terrific ball handler. He's great with ball fakes. He's got quick hips and quick feet to be able to turn his back to the defense, hinge, pivot, get back, turned around, and get the ball out of his hands very, very quickly. And when you combine that with fast wide receivers, it puts your defense in a lot of conflict and a lot of stress to be able to be mindful of the spacing, but also, is it run? Is it pass? You can't slow play because you're going to be in trouble. If you slow play against these guys, they're going to get behind you and they're going to kill you. So you have to be a very quick decision maker as a defender to make sure that you don't fall victim to the quick trigger and quick mechanics of Tua, the accuracy of Tua, and how quickly his receivers can get to those spots he anticipates them being in. So slow playing against this team is very, very difficult. Screens are not part of what they do. 2.8% of his passes this year are screens, second lowest in the NFL. So, and that's a number that's been low for them all season long, which leads me to the question, does that change this week? Does that change this week? We're looking at a Saturday night game where at a minimum it's going to be cold, but also there could be some snow and some wind. Well, this is a Miami Dolphins team that relies on that vertical passing game, and they're going to have to play football differently under those conditions. So what does that look like? If they're not going to be successful pushing the ball down the field like they have this season, what do they go to instead? Well, obviously the run game, we'll talk about that in just a moment, but there's got to be a quicker dynamic to their passing game, and that could be some more screens. How do they get some manufactured quick throws, free access throws for Tua under these circumstances? And to me, screens could be part of that. And so that's something to be mindful of this week for a team that hasn't run a lot of screens this year. Maybe that happens in week 15 against Buffalo. And then pressure. Let's talk about pressure real quick. Tua has been very good under pressure this season, but not as much recently. Over the last 3 weeks, when Tua is kept clean, he's only completing 52% of his passes, 8 yards per attempt, and a passer rating of 86.7. But when he is pressured, he completes 50% of his passes, 6.5 yards per attempt, and a passer rating of 67.5. So pressure is helpful, but the big thing here is not allowing Tua to go to where he wants to with the football with his initial read. You have to force him to come off of that. You have to force him to exhaust progressions and think deeper into the down. And that's where you're going to have success against Tua. If you give him free access and you make sure that first read's always available, he is going to light you up because that's what he's done against a lot of defenses this year. But we'll talk about here in just a moment. But there's been some things over the last couple of weeks that teams have put on tape that show you how to get Tua out of that rhythm. And so we'll get into that in just a moment. But first, this episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. You can create a free job post in just over a minute here, right? It's super fast, and you can reach the largest professional network in the world of over 810 million people. And I love that they have simple tools like screening questions to make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we're sure you're going to love. You can find Block Forever now wherever you get your podcasts. Block Forever is a brand new podcast from former NFL All-Pro Ryan Khalil and Audible. Khalil takes the conversation about football to the next level where he gives football fans an insider's look at the game through the eyes of the greatest players and personalities of all time. You can catch new episodes of Block Forever every week. They're recorded and released ahead of Thursday Night Football. So check it out for free on Audible or wherever you get your podcast. All right, let's talk more about this Dolphins offense and the Bills defense's matchup with it. Real quick here on their personnel, their pass catchers, it's all about Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. They're both over 1,000 yards already this season. Tyreek Hill is closing in on 1,500 yards. They've been unbelievably productive, and obviously the name of the game for those two guys is speed. They're unbelievably explosive, and they're also good football players, right? There's unbelievably explosive people out there that aren't good football players. These guys are. They run great routes. They get open. They create separation. They make plays on the ball. They're good after the catch. These guys are dudes at the position. And so that's what you really have to focus on dealing with. Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle with an accurate quarterback like Tua Tagovailoa. Now, they also have Trent Sherfield as their number 3 receiver. He's been more frequently involved in the offense than Cedric Wilson, who they paid a decent amount of money to come over in free agency. And then Mike Gesicki, their tight end. I know he's playing on the franchise tag this year, but he hadn't caught a pass in the last 3 games. Both Sherfield and Mike Gesicki have about 25 targets this year. They throw the ball to Hill and Waddle. Now, they will, these other guys have some chances, but this is really about Hill and Waddle. And then, they have Raheem Mostert out of the backfield who they'll throw the football to. Alex Ingold, the fullback that you need to be aware of in the passing game. Cedric Wilson is that number 4 receiver. So they've got other options, but it's really about Hill and Waddle. Now, I'm curious how the Dolphins are going to evolve here over the last part of the season, and if utilizing more of their ancillary weapons is something that they emphasize especially as there's been some new wrinkles put on tape to play against them defensively. I think it's going to be important for them to be able to get the football to those other guys more consistently. And so we're going to find out if that happens starting this week. But for as much as it has been about Hill and Waddle, and it's going to be about Hill and Waddle, I think their ability to get other guys going is going to be paramount for their success. And I think Mike McDaniel knows that. And we'll see if that happens this week. But that's something I'd be thinking about if I was Leslie Frazier. As far as their rushing offense, it hadn't shown up this year. And, Mike McDaniel coming from the 49ers, where he's the run game coordinator under Kyle Shanahan, all the success that the Shanahans have had running the football and the influence that they have on Mike McDaniel, you would have figured this was going to be a big part of their operation this year, but it has not. Now, is that because of personnel? Do they have the offensive line? Do they have the tight ends? Do they have the running backs to be the rushing offense that Mike McDaniel wants them to be? I think there's fair questions to be asked about all of those dynamics. But it just has not been a big part of their offense. Their lead back is, I guess, Raheem Mostert / Jeff Wilson. Those are their lead ball carriers. Jeff Wilson was carted off on Sunday night against the Chargers with a hip injury. So I'm not sure what his availability is going to be. Mike McDaniel spoke on it Monday, and he mentioned Tyreek Hill, who also has an ankle injury. It sounds like he's going to be fine. But Jeff Wilson could be a little bit more up in the air for this week. This is what he said about both of those players, quote, "But as far as I know, nothing has been significantly ruled out for next week regarding those two players," referring to Hill and Wilson. "We're obviously our best version of ourselves if they're both healthy. Bottom line is we'll play with whoever is healthy and no one cares about our problems. Our job is to right the ship, so that's what we'll start doing the second this press conference ends." So listening to the press conference, it feels like Hill's going to be fine. Wilson's a little bit more up in the air, but they're not ruling him out as of the recording of this podcast. But as for their run game, look, they went up against this 49ers team 2 weeks ago and ran the ball 8 times for 33 yards. It was a one-score game until, kind of the mid to late part of that fourth quarter. And their passing game wasn't clicking at all. And they still only ran the ball 8 times. You go to that Chargers game that everybody watched on Sunday Night Football. They called 13 run plays. It was a tight game. I know it didn't feel tight at any point watching it, but it was a tight game. Their passing game, again, was not clicking. The Chargers' run defense had been terrible all season long. I mean, they gave up like 170, 180 yards a week to anybody that steps in and plays against them. And they're without their 2 best defensive tackles. They're without Derwin James, and the Dolphins only ran the ball 13 times in a game where their passing game was just non-existent once again. Now, they had some decent yards because Tua actually scrambled a couple of times, which is he's been reluctant to do this year, and he had some good runs. But they called 13 run plays. Now, if this game's going to be snowy, they're going to have to find some different ways to play offense, and that's both exciting and scary. It's exciting because the things that have made them successful has been the passing game and the vertical passing game, right? That's been their bread and butter. And so they kind of have to relearn what's going to work. But also it's a little bit scary because you just don't know exactly what to expect when they move away from what's made them successful. And they might have to on Saturday. So that's going to be very interesting to me. As for their offensive line, left tackle Terron Armstead, he's a stud. He's been banged up all year, which is always the case with Terron Armstead. But when he got through the last game without any setbacks and played 100% of the snaps. I know he got worked on a couple of plays, including giving up a sack to Kyle Van Noy. But Terron Armstead's a high quality left tackle in the NFL. Their left guard is a major liability for them. Robert Jones has been in there. I know that Liam Eichenberg had been their player, and he's injured, and was struggled all year as well. So left guard's been a real problem spot for them all season long. Their center is really good. Connor Williams, outstanding center. Their right guard is really good. Robert Hunt. And then the right tackle is Brandon Shell. And I guess they would want Austin Jackson to be their starting right tackle, but he's been hurt. And Brandon Shell has come in and probably performed better than Austin Jackson, but I don't think he's anybody's preferred starters. So your 2 weak links for this offensive line are the left guard and the right tackle. And so you should be excited about that for the likes of a Greg Rousseau and an Ed Oliver to be able to take advantage of those matchups. So what specifically are my keys for the Bills on defense against this Dolphins offense? Well, number one is the 49ers and Chargers put some good tape out there on defending this passing offense. And so what were the principles of what both teams did to really limit an offense in the passing game that has been successful all season long? Number one, they were physical at the line of scrimmage with wide receivers. They were willing to press and be physical with them in the contact window. And what does that do? That encourages Tua to move his eyes, right? If he doesn't like the jam, he will come off that read, right? That's what you want. You want Tua to come off reads and think. So being physical with them at the line of scrimmage is an important thing to do against his passing offense. Now, you have to understand that there's some risk with that, right? You want to press Tyreek Hill and you want to press Jaylen Waddle, those guys can get behind you in a hurry. And so you have to live with some of that possibility. But I think the risk is worth the reward in this situation. You want to play with inside leverage and force throws outside. Tua throws the ball over the middle of the field. What do you do to counter that? You flood the middle of the field with bodies, and you play with inside leverage to force throws outside. If you force throws outside, you put stress on Tua's arm to be able to get the football there. They're lower percentage completions, especially for a quarterback that doesn't have ideal arm strength. So being physical at the line of scrimmage, playing with inside leverage, and I would do a lot of cover one. I'd be willing to play a lot of cover one this week. You have that robber, that lurk defender as well to shade. So you have your one high safety, but also using that other safety as a player that can roam and lurk is really going to allow you to dictate terms even more defensively. So middle of the field closed, right? And that's a little bit of a difference from what the Bills have done. They do a lot of too high, a lot of quarters, but I'd be leaning into middle of the field closed coverages this week and funnel those throws outside. Test Tua's arm strength and his willingness to pull the trigger on outbreaking throws. Now here's the caveat here. The Dolphins know this. They've seen what the 49ers have done. They've seen what the Chargers have done. So you need to be prepared for the counter, right? You need to be prepared for the counter. What are they going to do here? They can't just go on with business as usual because there's stuff on tape now. And so we're going to see what Mike McDaniel can pull off here to get his team out of a rut offensively. And so for as much as that's a great idea, everything I just said is a great idea and been very successful against his Dolphins defense, you need to be prepared for the counters and wrinkles that are coming based on their answers to the problems that the 49ers and Chargers have put on tape defensively against this offense. Number 2 is tackle. Tackle. The Bills had 16 more missed tackles against the Jets on Sunday, and this is just beyond ridiculous. The Bills have got to tackle better on defense. And I don't know that there's a magic button to push to solve this, but it is a problem. I think that NFL players on defense should have a missed tackle rate of around 10%. You can kind of live with a little higher, maybe 11, but really you're looking for under 10%. The Bills are failing miserably at being in that range. And I want to give you the players here that have played at least 300 snaps this year and let you know what the missed tackle percentages are according to Pro Football Focus. Taron Johnson, 13.8%. That's too high. Matt Milano, 15.6%. That's way too high. Damar Hamlin, 21%. That's ridiculously high. Dane Jackson, 18%. That's awful. Tremaine Edmunds, 8.5%. Thank you. That's an acceptable number for you. Jordan Poyer, 13.2%. He's normally under 10%. I give him some grace because he's basically playing with one arm out there. Daquan Jones, 12.5%. Von Miller, 22%. Ed Oliver, 4.2%. Good job, Ed. That's where we want you. Kyer Elam, 15%. Christian Benford, 21%. Shaq Lawson, 10%. Boogie Basham, 23.5%. Greg Rousseau, 20%. Jordan Phillips, 28%. Tim Settle, 18.8%. AJ Epinesa, 50%. These defensive linemen outside of Ed Oliver and Greg Rousseau, or not even Greg Rousseau, he's 20%. Ed Oliver and Shaq Lawson are the only ones in an acceptable range. I think the missed tackle rates of Tremaine Edmunds, Ed Oliver, and Shaq Lawson are the only three players that are at an acceptable missed tackle percentage, in my opinion. And I very specifically wanted to go through and name these names so you can be aware of who the problems are. It's basically everybody. But you can see, look at these defensive line numbers are just insane. Get guys down. Matt Milano, over 15%. DeMar Hamlin is starting safety for you, over 20%. Dane Jackson, 18%. I mean, come on now. You're just giving teams free yards. You're in position to make a play and you don't make it, which I expect to happen about 10% of the time. This is just too high. It's too high. It's literally why you lost some ball games this year. Definitely Minnesota and definitely the Jets. And number 3 is snow. I mean, I know that that's not really a key, but how is the snow going to impact how the Dolphins play football? Will they run it? So far this year, they're 31st in attempts, 29th in yards, and 25th in yards per rush. And how does the snow impact the passing game? It's going to be kind of weird. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think you have to be prepared for the Dolphins as you know them, but you also have to be prepared for the Dolphins and how they're going to adjust their style of play to the snow and based on what teams have put on tape against them the last 2 weeks. This episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all over at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those as well over at BetOnline. They're always the fastest, easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts. All right, let's talk about the Dolphins' defense against the Bills' offense. The Dolphins' defense has struggled this year. You know, they're probably a bottom half of the league defense, probably around that 20 range. I think them not having Byron Jones has really hurt them at corner, and they want to be a man-heavy team, and they don't have the horses to really do that. They've struggled in their pass rush department. I think they have some question marks on the second level opposite of Jerome Baker. And so their defense has been very inconsistent. I think going into the Chargers game last week, their defense was allowing over 30 points per game on the road. And so it's been a tough sledding for them on defense. So let's talk about this unit. Up front, got a couple of studs here, some really outstanding young players in Jaylen Phillips and Christian Wilkins. Those guys have absolutely come into their own and are high-level players that are very, very disruptive. Christian Wilkins is an inside player. Jaylen Phillips is an outside player. And so Spencer Brown's going to have his hands full with Jaylen Phillips. I mean, that guy is really kind of blossoming into a high-impact, disruptive football player. Same thing with Christian Wilkins. And so that's going to be some big challenges for the Bills, both at tackle and on the inside. Now, they've got other really good defensive linemen as well. Melvin Ingram, who kills the Bills every time he plays them, it seems like. Zach Sealer's a high-quality interior player. Bradley Chubb, who they just gave up their first-round pick for and committed a pretty significant salary to. You know, they've got other guys. It's not just Phillips and Wilkins. Sealer, Ingram, and Chubb are really good. And then Raekwon Davis is a solid nose tackle. I don't know if he's having his best season, but he's kind of their man in the middle. Long arms, heavy hands, big old body. And then Andrew Van Ginkel is this player that he just plays so hard. I mean, just not always where he needs to be, but my goodness, he plays with his hair on fire. And so he can do some versatile things for them off the edge. They got some guys there to deal with that they can send after the quarterback and do a lot of creative things with. At linebacker, Jerome Baker, obviously their best player there. And then alongside him, Landon Roberts, Duke Riley, they've both gotten chances to play this year. We'll see how they deploy them, but Jerome Baker's their guy there. At corner, Xavier Howard, he's not having a great year. In fact, he's conceded the most yards in coverage of any player in the league. He's had some struggles, and he has only one interception, so the big takeaways haven't been there for Xavier Howard this year, and I'm sure that has a lot to do with not having Byron Jones and not having Nick Needham in the slot, not having Brandon Jones at the other safety opposite of Javon Holland. I think that hurts a player like Xavier Howard, but he's given up a lot in coverage this year. And then opposite of him, I guess it would be Keon Crossan, who's had some good moments. He had some good moments against the Bills the first time they played, so don't sleep on him. And then a really nice young slot player in Kader Kuho, undrafted free agent rookie that has come in and just earned that slot spot. Played really, really well. And I think the Dolphins feel like they might have an answer there in Kader Kuho. So don't sleep on him. At safety, Javon Holland's their best player, rising star in the league. Physical, versatile, does a lot for that football team, plays with a lot of energy. And then Eric Rowe, we'll see if he can go. Has a hamstring issue. So Coach McDaniel said he was day-to-day when I listened to him on Monday, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll see if they have Eric Rowe. If not, they've played Elijah Campbell a good amount last week, and then Verone McKinley, young player, rookie this year, that I think would be a liability if he had to play in this type of game with his underwhelming athleticism, but I don't trust his coverage instincts, and I don't think he's a good tackler. So that'd be a problem for them if he had to play on Sunday. So, this defense is all about the front, right? They got a really, really good front, and they're trying to figure things out in their back seven. So what are my keys for the Bills on offense against this Dolphins defense? Is number one, be ready for muddy fronts and them committing extra rushers. If they're going to put a bunch of guys on the line of scrimmage, and a lot of times 5 or 6 of them are going to come. And sometimes they're going to drop guys. They're going to be very creative with how they align, muddy things up, and put stress on your offensive line to communicate, but also for your quarterback to not get his eyes fixated there, but also be aware of when they send too many guys where you have to account for that extra rusher. It's going to put some stress on Josh. There's no question. So if you're Ken Dorsey, you got to have built-in answers to get the ball out of his hands. Josh has to be Josh in the pocket. He's probably going to have to deal with some free runners and making guys miss. And, you go back to that first matchup in week 3, I thought the Bills had some challenges with this and when to protect versus when to throw hot, right? I think they need to have a good plan for dealing with this exotic front that Miami's going to attack you with. Now, there's risk reward with how they play defense like that. And a lot of times, you saw Justin Herbert kill him on Sunday night. Josh Allen's killed him in the past. So it's, they're playing with fire a little bit with that too, but they're trying to force negative plays and force you into bad decisions. So you got to be ready for that, and you have to have answers. Number 2 is the weakness of this defense is the secondary. Can you attack it on Saturday? Will the elements allow for you to be aggressive throwing the football against a secondary that has struggled this year? Because that's where you can win some matchups. And so as much as the snow is going to be there, and we'll talk about it in just a second, if you have chances to go after the secondary, you got to try it. And then number 3, you want to see if those boys from South Florida that rely on a finesse-style passing attack want to have a big boy fight in the snow and the cold and run the damn ball. Can you dictate terms? Can you be the more physical team that plays a game in the elements that you're supposed to be used to? So you want to test this run defense, and you want to be able to pound the rock and play physical against these guys. They just spent the last week on the West Coast. They're down in sunny Florida. They got to come up to Orchard Park. It's going to be cold, and it might snow. See what they have. Can you dictate terms in this game? Can you look like the team that is prepared to take advantage of the elements that you play in all the time, or are supposed to? Because you had to go back down there in September, and it was 1,000 degrees, and guys are passing out. They're having heat strokes. They need multiple IVs plugged in to get hydrated. Can you use your elements against them and the ways that you fell victim to their elements earlier in the season. I want to find out if this team can do that. And for the most part, look, they have. You go back to the Patriots last year in the playoffs, Falcons, Panthers, like those were good showcases of what this team can do in some elements and some cold. And I got a team from South Florida, from Miami. Invite them up and dictate terms. All right, folks, tomorrow we will continue our conversation about the Miami Dolphins playing the Bills on Saturday Night Football as part of our crossover preview with Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins. So that should be a good conversation, and then we'll do our typical Friday stuff, and obviously I'll be paying close attention to the onboarding and initial comments of Cole Beasley, and I'll have more to share on that on Friday. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you are subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.